Hey everyone, Eggman here with another video, and today we have a top 32 breakdown for the Carta Magica online regionals that happened this past weekend. It was over 1,000 players with this top 32 that we see here today, and a couple of things before we get started. First, I do want to thank Carta Magica for not only running the event, but also for giving out the deck list for this one. Also, myself and Brian from Stage 0 are able to do the commentary for it, which is on the Carta Magica channel right now. So if you guys want to see that, it's going to be linked in the description as well. If you guys want to see any of the games from this tournament, it's pretty close. Just a lot of cool games, and honestly, it's a really weird format, right? This is the end of our mini format that we get for the English version, where OP07 isn't legal yet, but the ban list of Reject, Sakazuki, and Great Eruption is live, so we can't run any copies of that, which just means we have a little bit of just different diversity in leaders and our card pool, and it just makes like a little bit of a difference and gets us, a little bit of flavor too. So I know that the deck list that we get from here, we don't have a lot of reason to see them, just because it is the end of the format that only we get, and OP07's its own different format. But I did want to go over these anyways. It's a really fun format, and honestly, just kind of I wish this was longer. I wish this was the format that we got on the release of EB01. It seems like there's a lot of different leaders that were very viable for it, a little bit more open from what we're seeing, but that is kind of where we're at. So we're gonna go over the top placing leader for each one of these two, but we're gonna go over this real quick. So as mentioned, this was a 1,000 players plus 10 rounds of Swiss best of one, and it was online. And of those top 32, we did have 11 Gecko Morias, 5 of the Star Deck 10 Law, 5 of the Star Deck 13 Luffy, 4 Star Deck 11 Utas, 2 Peronas, with one of them winning it and the other one getting second place, 2 Enels, 1 Nami, 1 Newgate, as well as 1 Monkey.D.Luffy from Star Deck 10. So kind of, as I mentioned, a good amount of diversity for this format. And I think based on kind of my thoughts going into this and kind of my thoughts going out, I think I mentioned that I think these 4 were the most popular, and then Perona was the one that, if I had time and if I wasn't moving and if I was actually entering one of these tournaments, Perona was probably going to be the one that I would try to grind the most. I think it has a good matchup into Moria traditionally, and it can kind of have some room to breathe, since its worst matchup, Sakazuki, is kind of out of the format. I mean, is 100% out of the format, right? So I think it's really cool that Perona is able to not only top but win this event, and hopefully we see a little bit more Perona in OP07 as well, since it does have a couple new card packages and everything else. But again, we are going to go over the top placing list with each one of these leaders, starting off with their first place. And for this one, we're also going to do second place. We have JT, who first place with Perona, as well as Piper, who got second place with Perona as well. And they're pretty different builds between the two of them. And I do also want to mention that I did do an interview with JT here on this YouTube channel, so if you want more of their insights, make sure to check that one out. But kind of like the big reason that he played it, I'm sure Piper's the same way, is that you have a pretty good matchup into Moria and into Law traditionally. Just with our leader effect being able to say, we get to either reduce something by 1 for free, which is why Sakazuki was so good. We didn't have to have any Dawn investment for it. Or kind of the more, the better part is that we get to rest a 4-cost or lower card every turn for free. Like, it's just an activate main. We press our leader, we press the button, and we get that ability, which is really nice. So this also works really well with the cost reduction that we get from Black, so being able to use something like Ice Age, and then we get to rest something 8 or less, which becomes 4 or less, 3 or less, and then we can use something like Ryuma to get rid of it. That's a really good removal thing for this deck too. And I think the only thing that I had issues with it before is that generically Sakazuki is just better in a lot of scenarios, which makes it hard to justify playing Perona. And then the other thing is that, we don't get cards into our trash really easy, which I think is the hardest thing with this deck in general. And so we do kind of rely on some cards to do that, including our Sabos, being able to use this to get cards into our trash a little bit easier. And also Sakazuki for JT's list specifically too, being able to use to say, you know what, I know I'm going to play 8-drop Moria next turn, be able to use the Sakazuki to say, all right, discard a 4-drop Ryuma, and then I know that next turn I could use a Moria play with that too, which is very, very strong. So in general, this leader is very good for getting rid of 4 costs or less, which is exactly what Gecko Moria and Trafalgar Law generally plays a lot of in these builds. So, and then also just looking at Piper's a little bit more on like the defensive. We do have like the 1 copy of Useless Kid, which is pretty impactful in some matchups as well. But and then we do have like the new pay, so a little bit of a I don't know, less consistent, maybe, I don't know how to say it better, but just just a little bit more tech options, including the Brook, being able to use this to get rid of a 4 or less by putting it into the trash. This card does not KO, which means that you are able to get around stuff like Sabo's protection or Borsalino's protection, and you can very easily just say leader effect, reduce the cost of your Sabo by 1, and then use Brook because it's now a 4 or less and get rid of it. So I think that's pretty good. And then weirdly enough, Brook can also be good into things like Nami. Maybe you could put 3 cards back into their deck, which is kind of interesting. So I don't think that's the main reason we play it in any regard, but Nami did top this one, and it's going to be coming up in the second. But honestly, I like Perona a lot. I think that it's very cool that it was able to shine in this kind of little format that we had, and I look forward to seeing if it's able to convert into OP07 a little bit, especially with Sakazuki not around. I think there's some good chances for this one too. So this is the build here, and congratulations to JT and Piper for their first and second places. Next up, we've got Gecko Moria. So this is Chris Sock's version of the build. Chris is a super duper consistent player, and with the we lost Great Eruption for this one, which honestly I think it hit Gecko Moria a little bit harder than maybe some people would admit. I do think we do build it a little bit differently, and we're able to do pretty close to the same amount of removal without it, but it is something that I think this deck super duper missed, because we're not very good at getting like some early removals, specifically like with Absalom. If we have like 4 Dawn, we can Great Eruption and then play Absalom to get rid of a 3 or less, a 4 or less, which is really impactful. Same kind of thing at 5 Dawn. So having to like play like a Suru or having to play like an Ice Age is a little bit tough for what this deck wants to do. But we are playing the Rebecca Brook package, which I think is the best build of the deck, specifically now that we are missing Great Eruption. Being able to use cards like Brook to get rid of additional cards, get that additional reduction too. There's some weird times like 6 Dawn, we have so many options for play with either using Brook for getting the reduction and then kind of comboing with the Absalom if we need to. We can also do like Hina into Brook, which are 2/3 costs to make to 6, which is really nice. Or we can do something weird, like we can do like Perona into Brook to get reduction. So, and we play Perona off our leader. So I think there's a lot of flexibility for what this deck can do with the Rebecca Brook package. Getting the value when we need it is very nice. And I think that Moria is going to be okay into OP07. I think Rob Lucci is going to take the spotlight that it was kind of hogging right now, but there are some good reasons to play it, and mostly based off of how accessible the 8-drop is for this leader and just kind of the general package compared to just other ones as well. So I don't have much more to say. Congratulations to Chris for their top with the Gecko Moria. And then next up we have Nami, who ended up getting 4th place with Hung Lei doing the job for it. And honestly, like, based off what I've been seeing in OP07, I think Nami's a little bit more viable than it used to be. It's always been kind of the deck that kind of shows up every once in a while, gets a top 16, and then just kind of fades back into obscurity. But with what I've seen from OP07, with it being a little bit of a slower matchup and kind of meta in general, there's a lot of matchups where Nami just has a really good time. And specifically because there's some different builds. I know this is kind of still the Impel down build, even though we have very little of that at this point. So this is kind of a unique build of it too. We do have cards like the Crocodile, which is a 7 Warlords, which can be impactful if we want to play that package in the next set, but also getting the reduction for our cards too is nice. We had the Mr. Hanger, which being able to use this to cycle cards actually came up in some of the matches that we were able to watch too. So that's impactful as an East Blue card, which if we're playing Opus can be impactful. And then just a good amount of events, kind of the general case ones that we see. We have 2 copies of Overheat, which is able to bounce our Kaya's back, which I know that comes up every once in a while too. We also have the White Snake, which is probably the best support piece for this deck that's been printed in the last little bit. Being able to use this to be a 6k leader and draw the card for 2 Dawn, I think is pretty fair. And then also Gravity Blade, which comes up too. Being able to get rid of 2 bodies for 7 is fantastic. It helps you in a lot of matchups where they are able to swarm the board, and if you get this off life, it's very good too. It hits a lot of things. So between Raging Tiger and Deathwink, being able to return a 7 or less back to their owner's hand, you have have a good amount of chances to hit something that lets you get that reduction or get that body off the board for free. So other than that, you'll notice that we play a lot of cards that have triggers, stuff like Overheat and White Snake. Maybe not as impactful. Overheat can bounce a 4 or less back to hand. We also have Brick Fist, kind of the same thing. So those can come up sometimes if you need to use them for stopping another attack kind of thing. But I think this deck's going to be pretty obnoxious. There's a lot of decks that are kind of going for late game value and kind of like the slower control matchup, and Nami just wins a lot of those in OPO7 too. So we'll have to see if Nami is how good it's going to be in the next couple weeks, but I think it's going to be moderately better than what it's been, and it's in a fine spot. So we'll see if that's true or not. But this is Hung's list, and congratulations for their top with this one. And the next up we have Uta, which is probably out of the meta in OPO7. We'll see. I think Bonnie's going to take advantage of just being a better generic green leader in most circumstances, but in this meta we have Étienne with their build of it right here, and I don't have a lot to say. Uta's pretty known for how it has to be built. You are so dependent on playing so many of your film cards that you're not able to play the diversity that another leader like Bonnie gets afforded, but when this deck goes off, it's very, very strong. Kind of the big deal with this is that we have to try to find our Eustace Captain Kidd, which is a little bit unstable for a deck like this when we can't hard draw. We have to hard draw, right? If we use our leader effect or any of our other searchers, it bottom decks this card, so we have to find it. And again, like there's so many scenarios where Uta can win if they're able to find this and play this card, but without any hard searching. And I would say like it has like negative ease to find this card with how it works. It's in a bit of a tough spot, so that's why I think like Bonnie can be a little bit better than this leader in the next set, but it's still good. You get some good value. Some tech that I see from this one is playing the 0 cost. Whoever wins this war becomes Justice, so being able to get rid of your bricks in hand, which even though you draw a lot of cards every more cards than average for the average deck, you run into this issue where you find just so many of these non-counter cards, right? You have to run so many of them already. You have to play like your Luffy, you gotta play your Nami, you're playing your 8-drop, right? Like being able to get rid of those and all of these events too with the 0 cost event, I think is impactful as well. So I don't have much more to say. I don't think Uta's going into OPO7, but if it is, I'd be happy to see it. And this is the build from Étienne there. And the next up we have our Trafalgar Law. So this is Erick's version of the build. And I think a lot of people are saying that Trafalgar Law was just the best deck in this format, and I was a little bit less reserved. I didn't think it was going to be Moria either, though, but Moria does seem to be at least the more popular of the decks in this this mini format that we had, and because of that, I think Trafalgar Law is in a bit of a rough spot because Moria is a pretty tough deck for this this deck specifically to get over. So we're also seeing this in Japan and Asia for their OPO8 meta, where Trafalgar Law is a little bit more rampant. We've been seeing Rob Lucci. It's one of the favorable matchups for Rob Lucci based on my own experience. And so I think that's kind of the same thing in our OPO7 waiting room, where Gecko Moria being a 5-life leader and also being a leader that's very good for removing cards on board just means that Trafalgar Law has a little bit of an issue just getting that like last piece of damage a lot of the time. It's very, very tough for this deck to kind of go for it. But excuse me, I think the other issue with this deck is that the consistency is not always there at times, but when we do see our consistency, it's in a really good spot. Our big piece is obviously the Reiju, being able to find this and be able to get the draw 2. If you're able to like use 2 of these effects, you probably win most games because it just gets you a lot of extra value. It also kind of depends on seeing the Eustace Captain Kidd early in some matchups, being able to use this to get that extra Dawn. And if you're playing against a deck that's not able to easily remove this card too, you get so much advantage for it. So Law is supposed to be kind of balanced around the fact that we are a low Dawn leader with using the -3 from our leader effect so often, but being able to get all our Dawn back from cards like Sashi and Penguin, and then also Zoro Juro, which has been a bit of a new add for this format, just because I don't think that like we used to be in a Sakazuki format with also reject around. There's just so many times where this could get hit the turn it was played, and now I think your opponent kind of has to work for it a little bit more, and the Dawn you get from this is a little bit more consistent if it hits the board on the early side of it. So I don't have much more to say. I think Trafalgar Law is so very good. It's going to be very present in OPO7 as well. I don't think it's going to be as crazy good as people have been saying, because it does have that consistency issue, which catches up for it quite a bit. But I do think it's a strong deck, and a big congratulations to Erick for their finish with it in this one. And then next up we have Enel. So this is Billy's version of the deck here, and Enel's going to be pretty good in OP07 in my mind. I think it's going to be an issue where some people won't know how to play against it, and it might get a little bit worse as we get longer into the format, but it's still in a good spot, and it was doing all right, I think, in EB01. There are some matchups that are a little bit tough for it, but if you are able to stabilize and play really defensively with this deck, I think you are in a good spot. For this build too, since we don't have 10-drop Ace, we are playing 4 copies of the 7-drop Enel, 4 copies of 8-drop Katakuri, and 4 copies of Yamato. Yamato I still think is like the best card for this deck consistently, for getting that removal, but you do have to be kind of like defensive, or kind of like try to starve out your opponent early game to be able to get the good clears from Yamato. Just make sure that they have kind of a moderately healthy life total. And then meanwhile, like 10-drop Ace is going to be in a good spot for this deck too. So I don't have much to say about this. We kind of know what this has been looking like for the last little bit, and it's definitely going to change in OP07 too. But it was just okay. I think like there was just some consistency issues with Enel where since we couldn't get removal as much, and we do still miss reject because that was removed from the card pool for Enel as well. It's in an okay spot, but it is missing a little bit removal, which I think Ace is going to help next set, since it does get that rush potential off a 10 cost. So I don't have much more to say, but this is the build from Billy, and congratulations for their top finish there. And then next up, we're going into our X2s. So this is Tass's version of Black Yellow Luffy, and kind of the same thing as I was saying like Enel. I think this deck is really good. I think this deck has a lot of potential for the meta in general, and it's just missing a little bit in this format, and the thing it's missing is the removal aspect. We do have the 5-cost Luffy that's coming out for OP07 that is very good for this deck. Not only is it just fit with the archetype in general, but being able to get rid of a 4 or less is very nice, and since we are playing a yellow and black leader, we can add in some more cost reduction that's going to be able to get more things into range for that too. So I think this deck is great. I think it's very fun. It's very particular and very specific for what the deck needs to do, and sometimes has like a really bad matchup into blue, I think too. But in general, I like this leader. It's something that you have to commit a lot of time to, but if you commit that time to this leader, you do get reward for it. And really, the only thing is that your matchups really depend on how easy they're able to remove this Sabo. And if they can't, you're winning. If they can, you're in a rough spot. So anyways, this is the build. Congratulations to Tass for their top with Luffy. And the next up, we have Newgate by Lewis. And I honestly think Newgate's been having a lot of up and downs in the last couple of formats. Started off up, and it's been slowly drifting down since then. And I don't know if Newgate's going to do well in OP07. And honestly, I'm a little bit surprised to see it finish in this format too, strictly because Sakazuki, I think, was the best matchup in the meta, or one of the better matchups for Newgate. And if you remove its best matchup and you don't remove its bad matchups, Newgate's going to be in a bit of a tough spot. But clearly still good enough to top. A 6K leader can still get there with an aging card pool. We do have some new ads though, including the Kid and Killer, which obviously does a little bit more work, I think, in the Trafalgar Law deck, but it's still a good finisher for us if we need it to. Just a 7K for 4 is nice, and we are playing a bit of the top end. We're only playing 4 Rad Beams and 2 copies of Kick Course, so no guard points, which is a little bit peculiar. We're also playing like Shiraya as like a nice blocker, so Shiraya is really good for just like a blocker that is a blocker, and then if we need it to be like an attacker later on, it can be good, but it's fine, especially with Great Eruption gone and Sakazuki gone. Getting rid of a 3-cost blocker is a little bit more expensive compared to a lot of other decks, and even if Red Purple Law wants to get rid of this, they have to at least invest like a Gordon, an Otama, a 4-cost Law kind of thing. So I think that's it makes it a little bit weird to remove it as well. So I don't have much more to say. We don't have the 4-drop blocker Marco, which I think is fine for how we're building this deck, and we'll see if Newgate's able to make it to OP07. It's, the more I think about it, it's probably a little bit unlikely, but Newgate can find a way sometimes, and we'll see if he does for that format. But this is Lewis's build, and congratulations for their top 32 here. And then lastly, finishing at exactly 32nd, we have Lazaro with their version of Star Deck 10 Luffy. And I made a tier list for my thoughts going into OP07, and I didn't mention Luffy for that format. And I think that was the of all the leaders, I think that was the one that got the most amount of comments. So either I made a big mess, or Star Deck 10 Luffy stands are the loudest. Or I guess both of them could be true, but I do think this leader is very good. At least better than it was at release. I think it's been sneaking up and in some particular plays. I think the Bond Clay is a very good add for this deck, being able to be a ramp card, but also being able to potentially do some good trades later on is very handy. We also have this Orjuro, which I mentioned for the Trafalgar Law, but this kind of sticks around the board a little bit more often in this format, which is really nice. And then we also have like our good top end too, which it's really interesting. We're only playing 2 copies of Star Deck 10 Luffy. And I think maybe if I was to give this deck maybe a bit of a fairer shake, it kind of depends on saying maybe 10-drop Luffy is just not the play for this deck moving forward. And the reason I say that right now is I think Enel is going to be very, very present in the next format, and if it is, it just means that Star Deck 10 or the 10-drop Luffy is just not viable, because you get to play it, but then you get to refresh their leader ability. So it's just, unless they're like at 0 life, your 10-drop doesn't really do anything in that matchup, which is a real shame if it's supposed to be your boss monster for your entire deck. Just having a leader that's probably going to be 15 to 20% of the meta just invalidate your win condition makes it very tricky for you to win against that matchup consistently. So because of that, I think that we're going to have to try to move to a different engine, or not really rely on the 10-drop. So I think that kind of shows what this deck's trying to do in particular. More of like, you know what, these 7 and 9 costs are a little bit trickier to remove since Sakazuki's not around as much, and I've been seeing some decks that kind of drop their copies of Ice Age, and so kind of as part of that, being able to be like a 7k, 8k, 9k leader does get a lot of impact in a lot of decks too. So as we've been seeing with Black Yellow Luffy as well. So I think this deck is interesting. I'll have to probably try it in OP07 as well, but big congratulations to Lazaro for their finish with this Luffy. And that's going to be it for this one. I hope you guys appreciate it. I know this format is officially over, but I did want to go over and honor the players who topped for this one. So it's a really fun format. I wish we got a little bit more with it, but I'm happy we got it in the first place. So that's going to be it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you all next time.